The sun beat down on the desert floor, baking the sand to a shimmering haze. Jesse Wilde lay face down, the gritty earth clinging to his bloodied shirt. 5 bullets had ripped through him, tearing flesh and bone. Clem, his supposed friend, had delivered each shot with a cold, dead stare. Now, buzzards circled overhead, their shadows a grim promise of what was to come. He gasped, a ragged breath catching his throat. Pain, a searing fire coursed through his body. He tried to move, but his limbs felt like lead. Clem's words echoed in his mind. Dead men tell no tales, Jesse. But Jesse wasn't dead yet. Fury, a potent cocktail of rage and vengeance, began to stir within him. It was a flicker of life in a dying ember. He would crawl, bleed, and claw his way back from the brink. Clem would pay. Every agonizing inch would be fueled by that single, burning desire, revenge. His mind swam in a haze of pain and memory. Clem's face, twisted with greed, flashed before his eyes. The metallic tang of blood filled his mouth. He had to focus. Revenge wouldn't come if he succumbed to the desert's embrace. He forced his eyes open, squinting against the blinding sun. The heat shimmered off the sand, creating mirages that danced just beyond his reach. He could see the faint outline of the distant mountains, a mocking reminder of how far he had to go. Clem, the name was a venomous curse on his lips. He remembered the glint of gold in Clem's eyes when they planned the stagecoach robbery. The gold they had risked their lives for. The gold Clem now possessed. And the woman Clem wanted. With a grunt of pain, Jesse rolled onto his stomach. He had to move. He had to live. He had to make Clem pay. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, the movement sending sharp jolts of agony through his body. The image of the stagecoach robbery flickered in his mind, a memory both vivid and taunting. Dust swirled around the horses' hooves as they thundered alongside the stage. Jesse, Clem, and 2 others, masked and armed, had brought it to a screeching halt. The strongbox, heavy with gold, was quickly secured. They had worked together, a seemingly unbreakable team. But even then, Jesse had seen the flicker of something dark in Clem's eyes. A hunger that went beyond gold. It was during the split. Clem argued he deserved more. He wanted all. Jesse refused, thinking of Sarah, needing to provide for her. It was then Jesse knew Clem was a snake, ready to strike. And strike he did, leaving Jesse to die a slow, agonizing death. Now, the memory fueled Jesse's resolve. He began to crawl. The midday sun glinted off the gold bars stacked high in saddlebags. The 4 men, faces hidden by bandanas, exchanged tense glances. Clem's eyes lingered on Jesse, a calculating look that sent a shiver down Jesse's spine even now, in his weakened state. Enough for everyone, Jesse had said, trying to diffuse the tension. But Clem wasn't listening. His gaze shifted, focusing on a small, intricately carved music box Jesse had taken from the stagecoach, a gift for Sarah. "That's a pretty thing," Clem had said, his voice laced with a dangerous undertone. "Worth more than your share, I reckon." Jesse had gripped the music box tighter. "It's not for sale, Clem." That was the moment. The moment Jesse knew their partnership was over. The moment Clem decided he wanted it all, the gold, the music box, and Sarah. Now, crawling through the sand, Jesse understood the full weight of Clem's betrayal. It wasn't just about greed, it was about possession. Each inch was a battle. The sand scraped against his skin, raw and bleeding. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one a reminder of the bullets lodged in his chest. Thirst, a relentless monster, clawed at his throat, making his tongue feel like sandpaper. But Jesse pressed on. Clem's face, Sarah's smile. These were the images that drove him forward. He imagined Clem, swaggering into town, flashing the gold, and stealing Sarah away. The thought ignited a fresh wave of fury, momentarily eclipsing the pain. He dragged his broken body across the scorching earth, leaving a trail of blood and desperation. The sun, a merciless eye in the sky, seemed determined to burn him alive. He had to find water. He had to survive. He had to reach Clem. The crawl continued, a testament to the unyielding power of revenge. The sun-baked earth offered no mercy. Hours blurred into an eternity of pain and thirst. Jesse's vision swam. He was close to giving up, the sweet relief of oblivion beckoning. Then he saw it, a coiled shape, still and lifeless. A rattlesnake, its scales dull and dusty. He crawled towards it, his hope flickering like a dying flame. He knew what he had to do. With trembling hands, he found a sharp rock and sliced into the snake's flesh. The blood, thick and dark, oozed out. He hesitated for only a moment, then pressed his lips to the wound and drank. The taste was vile, metallic, and tinged with the stench of death, but it was liquid. It was life. It was enough to keep the darkness at bay, to fuel the fire of revenge for just a little longer. He would survive this day. The desert played tricks on his mind. The shimmering heat warped the landscape, turning familiar rocks into grotesque monsters. He saw things that weren't there, visions of a past life, a life before the betrayal. He saw his father, teaching him how to ride, the wind whipping through his hair. He heard his mother's laughter, warm and comforting. Then Sarah appeared, her eyes the color of the summer sky, her smile a beacon in the darkness. She was standing in a field of wildflowers, beckoning him closer. "Come home, Jesse," she whispered. "Come home to me." The vision was so real, so tangible, that he almost reached out to touch her. But then Clem's face flashed before him, a dark shadow eclipsing Sarah's light. The hallucination shattered, leaving him alone once more in the desolate wasteland. But Sarah's image lingered, a reminder of what he was fighting for, a reason to keep crawling. Another day bled into the next. The landscape remained unchanged, a monotonous expanse of sand and rock. Hunger gnawed at his insides, a constant, agonizing ache. He was running on fumes, his body a broken machine, refusing to quit. Then he saw it, a dark silhouette circling overhead, a buzzard patiently waiting for him to die. It landed nearby, its beady eyes fixed on him, a scavenger sizing up its prey. Jesse wouldn't become buzzard food. With a surge of adrenaline, he grabbed a handful of rocks and hurled them with all his remaining strength. One struck the bird, sending it squawking to the ground. He crawled towards it, his hands outstretched. He killed it quickly, snapping its neck. He knew what he had to do. Raw, stringy flesh tore between his teeth. It was disgusting, repulsive, but it was sustenance. It was life. He would not be denied. He would survive. Clem would pay. Hope, a fragile butterfly, fluttered in his chest. In the distance, a dark smudge against the horizon. He squinted, his eyes burning with exhaustion. It looked like a structure. He pushed himself forward, the promise of shelter and, perhaps, water driving him onward. As he drew closer, the smudge resolved itself into an abandoned prospector's camp. A dilapidated shack, a rusted-out pickaxe, and a broken-down wagon lay baking in the sun. He crawled towards the wagon, his heart pounding with anticipation. Inside, beneath a tattered canvas, he found it, a dented canteen, still containing a few precious drops of water. He drank deeply, savoring each mouthful. The camp also offered a small, shaded area beneath the wagon, a respite from the sun's relentless glare. It was a haven, a temporary reprieve in his desperate journey. He wasn't dead yet, and with this small miracle, he might just survive. The water had given him a sliver of strength, enough to look at the wagon. The wheels were splintered, the axle cracked, but with the prospector's tools, he might be able to do something. He spent hours, driven by sheer will, hammering and tying and improvising. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning his skin to leather. Pain lanced through his body with every movement. But he persisted. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he had something resembling a cart. It was rickety, unstable, and far from perfect, but it was better than crawling. He could drag himself onto it, easing the pressure on his wounds. With a groan, he pulled himself onto the makeshift cart. It creaked and groaned under his weight, but it held. He gripped the makeshift handle and began to pull. The journey would still be agonizing, but now, just maybe, survival was within reach. He could picture Clem's face when he saw him. That was the strength he needed. Meanwhile, in the dusty town of Redemption, Clem and his gang were celebrating. The saloon was alive with the sound of raucous laughter, clinking glasses, and the off-key piano player. The gold was flowing freely, and Clem was holding court, basking in the glow of his supposed victory. He raised his glass, his eyes gleaming with avarice. To Jesse Wilde, he toasted, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. May he rot in the desert. The gang roared with approval, oblivious to the irony of their words. They believed Jesse was dead, a problem neatly solved. They were wrong. Clem's gaze drifted towards Sarah, who sat quietly in a corner, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. He winked at her, a possessive glint in his eyes. He thought he had it all, the gold, the power, and soon Sarah. He didn't know that Jesse was coming for him, and he was bringing hell with him. The night brought a different kind of terror. The desert air grew cold, and the silence was broken by the distant howls of coyotes. Jesse huddled on the cart, shivering, his body aching. Suddenly, they were upon him. A pack of coyotes, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, surrounded the cart, their snarls a chorus of hunger. They were drawn to the scent of blood, the promise of an easy meal. Jesse was too weak to fight, but he wouldn't surrender. He grabbed the largest rock he could find and swung it wildly, striking one of the coyotes on the snout. The animal yelped and retreated, but the others pressed closer. He fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, swinging the rock again and again, driving the coyotes back inch by inch. Finally, after a desperate struggle, they retreated, their hunger momentarily subdued. Jesse collapsed on the cart, exhausted but alive. The desert wanted him dead, but he refused to yield. The dawn brought a sliver of hope. As the sun rose, painting the desert sky in hues of orange and gold, Jesse felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had survived another night. He shifted on the cart, trying to find a more comfortable position, when his hand brushed against something hard beneath the tattered seat. He reached under and pulled it out. It was a pistol. Old, rusty, and probably useless, but a pistol nonetheless. He examined it closely, his heart quickening. It was a Colt Peacemaker, the kind he used to carry. The cylinder was jammed, and the barrel was pitted with rust, but maybe, just maybe, it could still fire. He spent the morning cleaning it, oiling it with whatever meager supplies he had. He didn't know if it would work, but it gave him hope. It gave him a fighting chance. Now, Clem would face more than just a broken man crawling out of the desert. He would face a man with a gun. The cold steel of the pistol triggered a memory. A sunny afternoon, the smell of gunpowder in the air. He was teaching Sarah how to shoot. Steady now, he'd said, his hand over hers, guiding her aim. Squeeze, don't pull. Sarah had squeezed the trigger, the shot echoing through the hills. She'd missed the target, but her face was alight with laughter. He remembered the way her hair caught the sunlight, the warmth of her hand in his. He had wanted her to be safe, to be able to protect herself. Now Clem threatened everything they had built together. The memory sharpened his resolve. He wasn't just fighting for revenge. He was fighting for Sarah, for their future, for everything Clem was trying to steal. He would make Clem pay for everything he had taken, for every moment of happiness he had destroyed. He had to get to her. The pistol felt heavier in his hand now, a symbol of what he had to protect. The desert continued its relentless assault. The heat, the thirst, the pain, it all became too much. Jesse collapsed, his body shutting down. The world faded to black. He was dying. He could feel it. This was the end. Clem had won. Then a rumble in the distance. A low, guttural growl that echoed across the barren landscape. He thought it was another hallucination, but then a drop of water landed on his face. Another followed, and then another. Then, a desert rainstorm, a miracle in the wasteland. The rain poured down, soaking his parched skin, washing away the dirt and blood. He opened his mouth, gulping down the life-giving liquid. He felt the strength returning, slowly but surely. The storm wouldn't last forever, but it was enough. Enough to revive him. Enough to fuel his burning desire for revenge. He was still alive. Clem wouldn't get off that easily. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and fresh. Jesse scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowed. He could almost smell the town, Redemption, just a few hours away. Then he saw it, a lone rider, a silhouette against the rising sun. Hope surged through him. He raised his arm, waving frantically. "Help!" he croaked, his voice hoarse. The rider changed direction, heading towards him. As he drew closer, Jesse's heart sank. It was one of Clem's men, a hulking brute named Hank. Hank grinned, a cruel expression on his face. "Well, well, well," he drawled. "Look what the cat dragged in." Still kicking at Jesse. Jesse knew what he had to do. He had been given a second chance, and he wouldn't waste it. He gripped the rusty pistol, his eyes fixed on Hank. The hunt was back on. Jesse knew he couldn't take Hank head on. He was still too weak. He needed a plan. As Hank approached, Jesse pretended to collapse, slumping against the cart. Hank chuckled, dismounting his horse and approaching cautiously, his hand on his gun. That's when Jesse struck. He lunged, catching Hank off guard. The rusty pistol fired, a deafening blast that echoed across the desert. The bullet found its mark. Hank crumpled to the ground, clutching his chest. Jesse, fueled by adrenaline, dragged himself to Hank's horse. He rummaged through the saddlebags, finding water, food, and ammunition. He took what he needed, leaving Hank's body to the buzzards. He mounted the horse, feeling a surge of power. He was no longer crawling. He was riding. Redemption was within reach. Clem's time was running out. The desert had tried to kill him, but it had only made him stronger. Now, he was coming for what was his. The town of Redemption lay before him, a cluster of ramshackle buildings shimmering in the afternoon heat. Jesse reined in the horse, his gaze sweeping across the dusty streets. He was a ghost, a specter risen from the dead. His clothes were torn and blood-stained, his face gaunt and weathered. He carried the scars of his ordeal etched deep into his skin. He was a broken man, but his eyes burned with an unquenchable fire. The townsfolk stared as he rode past, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. They recognized him, or at least they recognized what was left of him. Jesse Wilde, the man Clem had left for dead. He was no longer the man they knew. He was something else, something darker, something terrifying. He was the embodiment of vengeance, a force of nature unleashed. He had come to settle the score. Clem's redemption was over. Now it was time for reckoning. He rode toward the saloon. The saloon doors swung inward, revealing Jesse standing silhouetted against the harsh sunlight. The music stopped. The laughter died. All eyes turned to him. Clem sat at a table, a pile of gold coins in front of him. Sarah huddled beside him, her face pale and drawn. He stared at Jesse, his jaw dropping in disbelief. "Jesse," he stammered. "But you're dead." Jesse's voice was a low growl, barely audible above the sudden silence. "Not yet, Clem." He stepped further into the saloon, his hand hovering over the pistol at his side. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Clem's gang rose to their feet, their hands reaching for their guns. A tense standoff ensued, the air crackling with anticipation. The final showdown had begun. Everyone held their breath. The first shot shattered the silence. All hell broke loose. The saloon erupted in a chaotic ballet of gunfire and flying bodies. Jesse, despite his weakened state, moved with surprising agility. He dived behind the overturned poker table, using it as cover. He knew he couldn't win a straight gunfight. He was outnumbered and outgunned. He had to be smart. He used the environment to his advantage, kicking over tables, shattering whiskey bottles, and creating diversions. He picked off Clem's men one by one, using his cunning and knowledge of the saloon to outmaneuver them. He was a ghost, appearing and disappearing, a deadly force they couldn't contain. The air filled with smoke and the screams of the dying. Jesse was determined to survive, fueled by his burning rage and desire for revenge. He would make Clem pay for his betrayal. Every drop of blood spilled was a testament to his unwavering resolve. The dust settled, revealing a scene of carnage. Bodies littered the floor, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and death. Only two men remained standing, Jesse and Clem. Clem stood frozen, fear etched on his face. Sarah cowered behind him, her eyes wide with terror. "It's over, Clem," Jesse said, his voice raspy but firm. "It's time to pay for what you did." Clem lunged for Sarah, grabbing her and holding a knife to her throat. "Take one more step, Jesse, and she's dead." Jesse stopped, his face contorted with rage. He wouldn't let Clem hurt her, but he wouldn't let Clem win either. He stared into Clem's eyes, his gaze filled with a mixture of fury and contempt. "You're a coward, Clem," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You always have been." He wanted Clem to face him man to man. He would get his wish. The final showdown was upon them. The saloon was their stage, revenge their motivation. With a swift movement, Jesse disarmed Clem, sending the knife clattering to the floor. He grabbed Sarah, pulling her to safety. Then, he turned his attention back to Clem. He didn't kill him. He couldn't. Death would be too easy. Instead, he beat him senseless, leaving him a broken, whimpering mess on the floor. "This is for betraying me," Jesse said, his voice cold and unforgiving. "This is for leaving me to die. And this is for trying to take Sarah." He left Clem there, stripped of his gold, his power, and his pride. He would live, but he would live with the knowledge of what he had done, with the guilt of his betrayal forever etched in his soul. That was Jesse's revenge, a living hell. Now, it was time to leave redemption. He couldn't stay. The memories were too painful. He needed to find peace somewhere else. He looked at Sarah. They both needed to heal. Jesse and Sarah rode out of redemption as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert. They didn't look back. The ordeal had changed them both. Jesse was no longer the carefree cowboy he once was. He was hardened, scarred, a shadow of his former self. But he was alive, and he had Sarah. They rode in silence, the only sound the gentle rhythm of the horses' hooves on the sand. They didn't know where they were going, but they knew they were going together. The desert stretched out before them, vast and unforgiving. But they had faced the worst of it and survived. They had found revenge, but also, perhaps, a glimmer of hope for a new beginning. Jesse knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but with Sarah by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The sunset was beautiful, but tomorrow would be a new day.